morning, everyone. Before we start our session today, I would like to introduce myself first. I am Kevin Mampay Reyes, your instructor in Introduction to the Philosophy of the Human Person. Who among of you na kilala ako? Okay, di ba? Most of you is hindi pa ako kilala. Kasi ako yung bagong teacher ninyo sa philosophy, no? So most of you is hindi pa ako kilala, then gusto ko rin i-inform sa inyo na meron tayong class rules. While I'm discussing the topic, gusto ko yung estudyante is nakikinig. Gusto ko yung estudyante nakikipag participate, nakikipag-operate, no? So tayo ay darako sa ating aralin, which is about the human freedom. But before we start our session today, let me know your attendance first. Okay, so majority sa boys present, and same also sa girl. Very good, perfect attendance. So now let me ask if you remember our previous lesson. Mr. Libara, what is our previous lesson? Very good. It's all about philosophy. Anyone? Yes, Mr. Conde. Very good, Mr. Conde. Metaphysics. And how about girls? Miss Conde? What is our previous lesson? Except for philosophy, metaphysics. Yes, very good. Epistemology. And the last one. Yes, again, Mr. Libara. Ethics. Very good. So speaking of philosophy, what is philosophy? If you remember, if you understand our previous lesson. Very good. The term philosophy means love of wisdom. And how about metaphysics? Yes, very good, Miss Hassan. The study of metaphysics is the study to the nature of reality, of what exists in the world, what is like, and how it is ordered. And how about epistemology? Speaking of epistemology, what does it mean? Mr. Conde, what is epistemology? If you understand. Yes, very good. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. It is primarily concerned what we can know about the world and how we can know it. And how about ethics? Speaking of ethics, what does it mean? From the girls. Yes, Miss Pamela. Okay. The study of ethics concerns what we thought, concerns what we ought to do, and what it would be the best to do. And struggling with this issue, larger questions about what is good and right arise. So the ethics attempts to answer such questions. And what are those examples of questions in ethics? Yes, what is good and what makes actions or people good? What is right and what makes actions right? Is morality objective or subjective? How should I treat others? So that is an example, or that are the ethic attempts to answer the following questions. So before we proceed to our new topic, I would like to share our objectives. Yes, Mr. Lebara, kindly read our objectives. Thank you, Mr. Lebara. Now, we will discuss the human person and their environment. So speaking of the human person in their environment, who among of you explain about the human person in their environment? Yes, Miss Hassan. What's your own idea regarding this, the human person in their environment? Okay, very good. Now, before we start to discuss our new topic, I have prepared a word analysis. So as you can see, we have a pictures and what comes into your mind when you hear or see this word, and what are the words that you can associate or connect with this word or any political figures. From the boys, what comes on your mind when you hear or see this word? Freedom. Yes. Okay, very good. Freedom. Speaking of freedom, you have a freedom to choose. How about the girls? What are the words that you can associate or connect with this word or any political figures? Freedom to speak. Very good, freedom to speak. So now let's discuss what is freedom. In your own idea, what is freedom? Very good. What is freedom? So, freedom is intrinsic and essential property of the person. It is rooted in the human person's self-determination and the exercise of intellect and free will. We have a lot of examples of freedom that justify that what is freedom is, right? So, speaking of freedom, the quality or state of being free, such as the absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint in choice or action. For example, in college, you have a freedom to do what you want. Everyone should be allowed freedom of choice. Yes, we have a freedom of choice, the ability to make their own choice. Freedom of speech. Yes, that is an also example of freedom. We have a freedom of speech and freedom of thought, the ability to say and to think whatever you want. We're both denied under the dictatorship. They are company of freedom and of information, for any information to be allowed to be given to anyone who wants it. Yes, we demand freedom, injustice, persecution, or the condition of not having to suffer these things. Yes, freedom, speaking of freedom, a right to act in the way you think and you should. Being able to vote as what you want, that is important, like political or democratic freedom. Is in our country, we are free, right? So you can do, or you can do what you want, but there is a limitation. You know, we have a different types of freedom. Yes, speaking of physical freedom, do you have an idea? Psychological freedom and moral freedom. So now let's discuss about physical freedom. In your own idea, what is physical freedom? Is from the word physical, from the voice. Rex Conde, what is an example of physical freedom? Can you give me an example of physical freedom from the word physical? You are free to. Free to what? Very good. Physical, that is an example of physical freedom. Yes. When you say physical freedom, you are free to act. Just for example, a physical freedom, you can move your hand. You are free to raise your hand. You can free to move your head. We have physical freedom. We are free to exercise. Speaking of physical freedom, when you say physical freedom, it pertains to our physical to do free. Okay, so anyone of you have an idea about psychological freedom? Yes, psychological freedom from the word psychological. Yes. Just an example. You have an emotions. You have feeling someone. You have you are in love with someone. Diba? So that is an example of psychological freedom. You are included our feelings, included our thoughts. We are free to think. We are free to to express our psychological freedom. Yes. So who among of you can give an example of psychological freedom from the girls? Very good. That's an example of this psychological freedom. How about moral freedom? Now let's discuss about the moral freedom. Moral freedom is a very important kind of freedom. Speaking of ethically, according to Epicurus, freedom is not fulfilling all desires, right? But instead being free from vain, unnecessary, or addictive desire. The addictive is enslaved even when he obtains his drug. But the virtuous person is free because she doesn't even desire the drug. Right? We have a freedom. If we have a moral freedom, we can do anything, we can have anything, but there is a limitation. You know what I mean? You know what I am talking about is about moral freedom, because we have a limitation. We can, yeah, although we can have anything, we can have what we want, but there is a limitation. Freedom is when the anger, anxiety, greed, or hatred and unnecessary desire drop away in the presence of what's beloved, of sacred. This means that the greatest freedom is freedom from something, not freedom to do something. Yes. The greatest freedom, take note, the greatest freedom is freedom from, freedom something, not freedom to do something. Yes, because we have freedom freedom we there is a positive and negative impact. Yes, speaking of metaphysically, you know what is metaphysically? As a concerning free will, The key man be understanding how human choice can be caused but not determined. In the case of free will, freedom emerges from, but it is not reducible to, the activity of the brain. In ways we do not yet understand, humans sometimes have the ability to look over and choose between competing paths. When it comes to the consciousness and free will, I trust my introspection that both exist more than I trust that supposedly scientific worldviews which have no room for idea. Right? As for politics, speaking of politics and freedom, the most important freedom is what? What is that? Freedom to freedom of speech. We need this for truth, good thinking, tolerance, open-mindedness, humility, self-confidence, love, and humor. So that is the most important. Freedom of speech. We have freedom for truth, good thinking, tolerance, open-mindedness, humility, self-confidence. You are free to express your self-confidence, to show your self-confidence. You are free to love. You are free to show your love. You are free to love someone. And humor. We discover truth only when we are free to explore alternative ideas. We think we only when people are free to give us feedback. We develop the virtues of tolerance and open-mindedness only when we are free to hear these disagreeable ideas. We develop humility when our ideas are tested in a free to public. While self-confidence, yes, because we have a self-confidence, arises from those ideas that survive this to survive this test. We love only in freedom as we learn to love others. Yes, this is also important to show our freedom of love. We learn to love others in spite of their ideas, not because of them. And we can love deeply only where there is a freedom to potentially offend. Give me freedom or give me death. Right? It's not actually a choice. For we are all did without freedom. Yes. We have to consider uh, uh, to know what is the essence of freedom, because if you know your freedom, you're able to do with limitation, to express your freedom, your feelings, freedom of expression, freedom of choice. We have a lot of freedoms, but there are many kinds of freedoms, right? You're free to you're free to go and school. You're free to choose what you want career in the future, right? So there are many types of freedom. Either this is positive, negative, political, social, etc. But I think the most people would say that generally speaking, freedom is the ability to do to do what you want. However, what is one and or wants is constrained by external factors such as alcohol or drugs or torture. Yes, because some people say I have freedom to take drugs. I have freedom to take risks. But there is a consequence if you take if you if you attempt to try take drugs, because there is that is punishable by law, right? So if you know the freedom, if you know your freedom, you have to you have to uh, you have to know your limitation, because some of your actions may be punishable by law. Maybe that is not good for you, or maybe that is a huge impact to the society. So you have to consider what would be the consequence your in every actions you take. Freedom can be considered metaphysically or morally. To be freely metaphysically means to have, yes, speaking of, any one of you have an idea what is metaphysically freedom? What is metaphysically? From the girls. Yes. Speaking of metaphysically means to have some control over one's thoughts and decisions. And one is not reduced to reacting to outside causes. To be free morally means to have the ability to live according to moral standards. Yes. To produce some good and to attain some virtue. Moral freedom means that we can aspire to what is morally good or resist what is good. And such, the moral life needs an objective standard by which to measure which actions are good and which are bad. Right? If if uh, if we if we know what is moral freedom, we can we will have an idea, or we will measure that uh, is it good or bad. Any one of you any one of you can any one of you have questions about physical freedom, psychological freedom, and moral freedom, the difference of three types of freedom? Okay, so if there's no clarifications or questions about the types of freedom, let uh, let moves let discuss about this one. Should freedom be absolute? Yes or no? If freedom should be limited, what would be its limits? Yes, that's what I said. If you have a freedom, you have to know your limitation. What would be its limits? Because we have a moral standard to know what is good and to know what is bad. Right? Okay, so write a philosophical reflection on freedom. So all of you understand or answer these three questions. I will give you 10 minutes to answer uh, these three questions. Okay, so you may start now. Okay, so I will read the first questions. How is freedom an expression of our humanity? How is freedom related to self-determination? Do you use your freedom responsibly, and how and why? Okay, you can submit your reflection in our Google Classroom, and I will read your answer. Yes, and define and explain the meaning of freedom. Enumerate and give examples of different types of freedom, such as negative, positive, individuality, from manipulation. Explain the importance of freedom in man's daily living and his encounter with the world. Okay, so class, define and explain the meaning of freedom. Enumerate and give examples of the different types of freedom, such as negative, positive, individuality, and freedom from manipulation. Explain the importance of freedom is man's daily living and his encounter. Okay, class, so you have time to answer these two questions. I will give you 10 minutes, another 10 minutes to answer these two questions. And submit your answer in our submit your answers to GCR. Okay, so this is our assessment for today. Identification. We have a 5 identifications. Refers to the intrinsic essential property of person. Refers to the absence of physical restraint. Known as freedom of choice when a person performs action which considered right and wise. Refers to human person's self-determination in the exercise of intellect and free will. Refers to using freedom in a manner that upholds human dignity and goodness. Okay, so what is the answer number 1? From the boys. Refers to the intrinsic and essential property of the person. Very good. Freedom. Refers to the absence of physical restraint. Oh, very good. How about number 3? Known as freedom of choice, when a person performs actions. Very good. Physical freedom. How about number 4? From the girls. Refers to the human person, self-determination, and exercise of intellect and free will. Very good. And how about number 5? Refers to using freedom in a manner that upholds human dignity and goodness. Moral freedom. Very good. So, naiintindihan yung ating discussion today. So, before we proceed to our assignment, is there any clarification regarding the topic we discussed today? Okay, so if there's no questions, I will give you the assignment. We have a 2 questions of answer the following questions. As a student, what makes you free? How does freedom shape your personality? Kindly take a screenshot this and submit your assignments in our Google Classroom. Is there any clarification, class? Thank you for your time and God bless.